Good evening and welcome to this meeting of the Planning Committee, including those watching online. If the fire alarm is activated, please vacate the offices via the stairs, either through the security door to my right or opposite the lifts in the foyer. Please do not use the lifts. Please assemble in Hawley Square on the Green, where officers will assist you and advise when it is deemed safe to return to the chamber. Does anyone intend to film or record audio of the meeting? No. I would advise that if filming does take place, anyone in attendance in the public areas may have their image captured, and I urge anyone filming proceedings to avoid filming members of the public, particularly if there are children present. Any speakers using the microphones in the middle may be picked up by cameras recording the meeting, and members of the public in the public gallery behind them may have their image captured from those. Would everyone present please ensure their mobile phones are turned to silent and that they are not used to make or receive phone calls or messages in the chamber whilst this meeting is in progress. I do not have any councillors wishing to speak under section 20.1 at present. Are there any members who wish to speak under section 20.1? No, thank you. I have apologies from Councillor John Dennis and Councillor Paul Moore. Do I have any other apologies? No, thank you. Are there any declarations of interest? Councillor Alban.
Yes, thank you, Chair. On item 5E, I'm the Cabinet member for the construction of this, should it go ahead, so I need to declare an interest in relation to that. But also, Chair, I think it's right, as there are two other council applications on items 6 and 7 that I should also leave during that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Keane.
Thank you, Chair. The same items, although it's not my portfolio responsibility as a Cabinet member, I feel I ought to withdraw.
And Councillor Bright. Same thing. Thank you. Councillor Wing.
Item 5D, I actually live on Addington Street, which is the other end of Broadway.
Right, thank you very much. So, next item, do members agree that the minutes of the Planning Committee meeting held on the 18th of December 2024 be approved as a correct record? Can I have a proposer and a seconder? Councillor Alban and Councillor Bayford. Do members agree? Thank you. And do members agree that the minutes of the Planning Committee meeting held on the 15th of January 2025 be approved as a correct record? Can I have a proposer and a seconder? Councillor Alban and Councillor Matterface. Thank you. Do members agree? Thank you. Okay, just a reminder, any site visits will take place for committee members on the morning of Friday the 7th of March at 9:15. And now I will hand over to Mr Livingstone to update on agenda item 5F. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Following the publishing of the committee agenda, I'm just going to update on 5E and 5F. So on 5E, which is public conveniences, the Council received an additional comment from Southern Water regarding that item subsequent to the publishing of the agenda. They've stated that the information requested in their comment, which is in the pack for foul sewage and surface water disposal information to be submitted, is no longer required. This comment is online, also it was put in the members' room. Therefore, the officer recommendation to approve the application is updated to remove condition 3, which is in the report. In addition, following the publishing of the committee agenda, the planning application for Arlington House 5G A06 has been withdrawn from the statutory planning register by the applicant, and therefore the application will not be determined by the council or discussed this evening. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I had a confusion of letters and numbers on my sheet, so that's why it didn't quite match what I announced. So we move on to public speaking, and the first item on the agenda, item 5A, is A01 Westwood Lodge, Poorhole Lane, Broadstairs. Speaking in favour of the application is Mr Warner. Mr Warner, you have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Members, good evening. My name is Simon Warner, Director of Warner Planning, and I'm speaking on behalf of the applicant this evening. In this speech, I'd like to take a few minutes to highlight the most important aspects of this high-quality development make a positive contribution to this brownfield site. The application is a result of collaborative discussions with your planning officers and the statutory consultees. The application seeks outline plan permission for a care home. The care home can include dementia care, end-of-life care, nursing care, residential care, and all respite care. We have several parties and operators interested in bringing this scheme forward subject to planning permission. The application site is in a well-established area. It's located in an inherently sustainable location, close to local shops, homes, services and public transport. The site was being used as a compound and temporary office for the development of 153 houses being constructed to the north of the site. Prior to this, there were warehouse structures on the site. Existing and new planning policy encourages a brownfield-first approach to development. This application seeks to optimise the potential of this previously developed site. There is an acute need for such facilities. Consultants Carter Wood estimate there is an undersupply of 109 care beds within a 5-mile radius of the application site. In addition, since the pandemic, there's been a drive for better quality care homes with appropriate layouts and facilities. Within the recently revised National Planning Policy Framework, older person housing is referenced and encouraged in paragraph 63. The government has also published a new document for housing older persons. This demonstrates that the benefits of older person accommodation and the acute shortfall. This suggests that on average 5,000 to 7,000 later living homes are built annually. This is a sharp contrast to the 30 to 50,000 new homes a year estimated to be needed to meet the growing older population. Older person accommodation has a significant benefits to a local area, which include allowing residents to get the care they need on site, reducing pressure on the NHS and social services. There's a significant economic output supporting the local economy. A scheme such as this will provide a contribution estimated to be £78,000 to local business rates, generate 62 direct jobs and 21 indirect jobs in the local supply chain. They allow older people to right-size, freeing up homes in the local housing market. Care homes also help to reduce loneliness and isolation within the elderly community. There are no in-principle objections from statutory consultees, and detailed matters will be addressed at the reserved matter stage. The committee report includes a series of conditions which our client is happy to agree. In conclusion, the proposal will make a positive contribution to the Council's housing needs applies on older person's housing needs. The scheme is policy compliant and will achieve overwhelming benefits. As a result, I therefore request you support your officer's objective and comprehensive assessment of the scheme and grant plan permission in accordance with the recommendation for approval. Thank you.
Thank you. The planning officer will now outline the report.
Thank you, Chair. So the application site is located at Westwood Cross on Porthole Lane. Members that were here over the years will know this site quite well because the outline application, which was developed for 153 houses, came to members. It was actually refused and then approved by a planning inspector on appeal when the site was located in the green wedge between Margate and Broadstairs. Subsequent to that, the reserved matters application showing the detail of those houses came before members. As mentioned in the speech that we've just heard, this site itself is previously developed land within the wider site, which is currently laid as hard standing, but previously did have a number of structures and commercial businesses that operated prior to the application coming in 2015 for the outline permission. So this is an isometric view from Google Earth, just showing some of the structures that are still currently on site. You can see the tree coverage, which we'll talk about in a little bit, between the new housing development and the area that to be proposed to be developed. So this is the red line of the site. So the red line of the site does go around a lot of the trees that are in this area. So some views of the site. So we're on Porthole Lane looking towards the site itself. You can see the structure that we could see in the other aerial image to the rear of the site and the tree coverage behind. This is looking towards the access that goes into the site where the 153 houses are. Behind these trees is the Grade 2 listed cottage. So this is looking down towards the roundabout, which links to Star Lane and Ramsgate Road and Porthole Lane. Then you've got the entrance that's not quite opposite the site, but has access to the commercial units. So just looking into, going down the access road into the site and looking to the left. So you can see this is a view of the site now. It's sort of closed off. So inside the site you can see quite established hard surfacing. So then looking towards the rear of the site, so the tree cover here, so these trees here are protected via an area TPO from 1988, so these trees are protected, and we'll have a look at some of the parameter plans that show the areas to be retained as trees. So back out onto the road, so yeah, turning and looking towards that tree area, and then going further down and looking then down into the development and turning left. So you can see this is the tree cover as well. These trees are the 1988 protected trees. So might be able to just make out the building that's on the site here on the left-hand side. And then on the right-hand side is one of the new dwellings there. So you can see this band of trees that separates the new housing development with the site. So turning the opposite side of this internal access road, you can see the cottage, so you can see how low down that is in comparison to the access road and indeed Porthole Lane. And then these are some images of when it was used as a construction compound, so you can see that building that's still standing at the rear of the site, and you can see obviously where they had the two-storey containers when the site was being developed. So this is a view from Google Street View, just looking into the access to the cottage. So this is separate from that internal road, and you can see again how this internal access road drops down in level, and then you've obviously got the lower level cottage here with obviously some of the landscaping between the internal access road and the listed building. So, as mentioned, and as we've seen in the images, there is a large area of hard standing. The application itself is an outline application, so all matters are reserved. So when we're looking at plans, both site plans and also elevations, they are illustrative site plans. So as part of a reserved matters applications, we would get the detail on scale, appearance, etc. So this proposal is for a 60-bed care home, which is 3-storey. That's come down from a 66-bed care home when it was originally submitted, and we'll talk about why that's the case. So the main issues for members to consider are the principal development, the impact on the character and appearance of the area and specifically designated heritage assets, highways, and I think it's fair to say trees as well. So this is the landscaping scheme as part of the reserved matters for the 153 houses. Now, the site itself, which is located down here, so this is part of the wider site in terms of the allocation for the site. So it's allocated as a housing site, of which it's indicatively given the notional amount of 153 houses. So that proposal that was subsequently approved by the inspector and then put through the reserved matters has been developed, and therefore anything that's developed elsewhere on the site is additional to that. So it's not considered that the loss of this particular land loses or impacts upon our 5-year supply of housing land, for example, because it's not been factored into that. So this is an additional benefit, although it is strictly speaking a departure from the housing policy because they are proposing a C2 use. Now, the applicant has put forward an argument that actually by creating a care home, you may increase the number of properties in the district that may obviously vacate, become sort of open to the market when people move into the care home. So that is a factor worth considering. The proposal itself as a C2 use as well is also supported by policy HO18, which is for care and supported housing. And generally, taking aside the fact that it's a departure from the policy, there is policy support for this. So the principle of development, subject to all other considerations, could be considered to be acceptable and certainly is by officers. So in terms of the impact on character and appearance, so as mentioned, we have illustrative site plans. So this is showing how a building can be accommodated on the site. Now, because of the the tightness of the site in which we have the previously developed land as well as the trees, there is really only one location that the building can go as well as to get parking in it. However, this wouldn't necessarily be fixed, but it's highly likely that this is how the site will come forward. So you can see here you've got an internal access road. So this is it's actually an indicative access point that would come off the internal road, so not off Porthole Lane. And then you have an area for parking. So you've got 18 parking spaces, of which includes the 3 accessible bays. You have a turning area, bin and cycle store, and then you have the main building itself in this L shape. So in terms of some of the concerns that were raised by officers, you'll note in the report that there is a comment from the previous conservation officer raising concerns about the impact on the listed cottage, so just off the bottom right of the image that you can see. So the cottage, the gates and Westwood Lodge itself were listed in 2017 subsequent to the actual approval outline of that 153 house development. The proposal would be using this about 40 metres from the front elevation of the cottage, and you've seen from the photos that you have got two internal roads with a landscape buffer between the two. Our concerns related to having a 3-storey development that went the full distance across the site, as close as you have to get that number of beds in, which was 66. So working with the applicant, this parameter plan has been submitted. So what this is showing is that in the orange area, that would be where a building could be constructed, which would be 3-storey in height, of which it would be 2-storey with a mansard roof. In the strip between the green and the orange, that would be where it would be a 2-storey height building. And then the green area here would be a landscape buffer, and then the green area around is where the TPO trees are. There is a separate buffer because of utilities, which is in blue across the front. So it's proposed that this particular plan has to be accorded with, if in the event this is approved, in any reserve matters application. So there's a condition which would require any application to accord with this parameter plan. The idea behind it is to reduce the scale of the building as you get close to the listed building, and we consider that with the distance, the established landscaping that's there, and also the new landscaping that will be provided, that the impact on the listed building would be lessened. Now, there will be an impact, because to put any construction on this site does have an impact on the listed building, but we do consider that the impact on the designated heritage asset will be less than substantial, and therefore the impact would need to be considered against the public benefits of the proposal. In our view, the public benefits of providing a care facility where there is an identified need would outweigh the impact on the listed building, especially when the mitigation that's been put forward is put in place. So just to show you that relationship again, so you've got the access into the site, which is pretty much where the construction access was. You have the listed building here, and obviously the distance between the two, with the separation with both the landscaping and also the 2 internal access roads. So again, an illustrative view of what this would look like. You can see that there's the 2-storey element on the right-hand side, just showing how that would be. The dotted line shows what was originally put forward, and how that's been reduced by removing those 6 bedrooms. So there have been some other elevations that have been provided just to show how the building could be designed. So this would be it could be an elevation when you're facing from that internal road that goes towards the 153 houses. So you can see that it's a 2-storey element on the left-hand side there as you look at it, before then it steps up to the 3-storey side development. And again, this is an illustrative street scene where they've included the Sycamore Lane. I think it might even be called Forest Drive now, but you've got the road that's there that you can see. So you can see the distance where the access is then to the listed building. So again, to give you an idea of the distances between this site and the listed building. So one of the issues that's been raised in comment by KCC Biodiversity, as well as the various sort of societies and consultees, is how this application interacts with the previous application, the Reserve Matters, and specifically in regards to a woodland management plan which was submitted and conditioned as part of the approval of the 153 houses. So you can see the site is in this area here, so it's predominantly in area 3, but it does include some bits in area 2. So in terms of what was sort of put forward as part of the woodland management plan in those applications, those areas, specifically the trees that were in those areas, were put forward to have thinning out basically of the trees themselves, removing ivy, and then replanting with native tree species within those treed areas. There was no proposal within the woodland management plan to actually remove the hard standing in this area and plant trees. It was within the woodland areas that pre-existed. Now, KCC Biodiversity have raised concerns about the impact of having a development so close to the woodland areas and have requested a condition with regards to lighting, but also have required that a new woodland management plan would be submitted with the Reserve Matters applications once the landscape details come in. It is considered that that is absolutely necessary because obviously this is a separate application, so it stands separate from this. Obviously, anything that conflicts with the previous woodland management plan, we need to have approved something to avoid a conflict with something else. So we would need a management plan for this particular area. So we do think that condition is necessary and passes the required tests to get it in. In terms of the ecological enhancement plan that came in with the 153 houses, you'll see that the individual dots relate to individual log piles, brash piles, owl boxes, bat boxes, etc. There are none that were proposed within the specific area that where this development is going to be. Again, the hard standing is obviously would be in situ for the previous proposal. So we don't think there is a conflict with that. However, obviously in any future Reserve Matters application, we would need the enhancements to be provided to not just provide the woodland management, but also the ecological enhancements that would be required in every application. So there is a condition, which is condition 13, which requires a detail of habitat specifically for those areas where the site is not to be developed, but obviously is part of that red line that we saw earlier. So just to confirm what the applicant has indicated with regards to the trees on the site and how the proposal would sort of fit in with those trees. Again, landscaping is a Reserve Matters, so we're not approving the landscaping in this, but you can see where the building has been accommodated where there aren't any trees at the moment, and obviously you've seen from the images that that's the case. But you can see here that there is a large amount of tree cover in close proximity with where the building is. So there is an arboricultural impact assessment that's provided, but there will be required to be a new tree survey, details of new planting to occur, all coming in the Reserve Matters application, and obviously that would include details of how the existing trees are to be protected. Now there is a comment from the Council's arboricultural consultant about the trees that are on the boundary with where this development is occurring, and it is considered that they are of lesser quality and potentially could be removed. However, that would be subject, again, to the Reserve Matters. This is not approving that. We do not have the details of landscaping that we're approving tonight. So just a quick few elevations. I'll just skip through these because we have seen them just to give them their context. So in terms of transportation, excuse me, the application has shown, again on the illustrative layout, the proposed to provide 18 parking spaces. So this is on the basis of a transport statement that's been provided, which looks at likely staff numbers that would indicate that there would be 8 ancillary staff for the care home with 2 resident staff, which would mean a requirement of as well as obviously the 60 beds, which would create a requirement of 17 spaces, 6 of which for staff and 11 for visitors. So that is according with the KCC parking standards and what they would require. So KCC don't have any objection to the amount of parking that has been illustratively shown, but again, the detail will be coming through the reserve matters when we're looking at the layout. This is showing that it can accommodate the amount of parking whilst providing a 60-bed care home. In terms of movements to and from the site, it's not considered that the movement from staff and visitors to the care home would have a severe impact on the network. So again, the transport statement, which has been looked at by KCC, indicates that using the TRIX database, it would create 10 additional two-way movements in the AM peak and 7 in the evening peak. They have also shown on this, in this area here, the way that service vehicles can turn around. That provides tracking for a 13-metre vehicle. Now, 13-metre vehicles are for our refuse trucks, but this is a commercial business, so it wouldn't come under TDC. But obviously, we need to ensure that it's got adequate turning for fire service, ambulance, etc., and so on. So the site is considered to be a sustainable location in terms of walking distance for staff and visitors to potentially use the bus network for public transport. Concerns that have been raised by residents about the lack of a dedicated crossing point on Porthole Lane. We have sort of investigated this with highways about whether or not there is justification to request a crossing point to be provided as part of this application. It's not, though, in their view, considered that due to the amount of pedestrian traffic created by this particular use, staff and visitors really alone, that it wouldn't justify having a new crossing to be installed on Porthole Lane. And there were also concerns from KCC about what that would actually do to the free flow of traffic on the network and how it would interact with the different access points there as well. So it's not considered by KCC to be justified to require that or to refuse the application on the basis that it hasn't been provided. So overall, it is considered that the development can be accommodated on the site and with a large amount of conditions can avoid impacting on the protected trees as well as the listed building. And therefore, looking at the public benefits, it is considered that the application should be approved, and therefore that is our recommendation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I move that the officer's recommendation is adopted. Would the Vice Chair please second?
Seconded.
Thank you. I do have speakers, but before I go to the first speaker, could I clarify something? The proposal starts off by saying the outline application with all matters reserved, and you have referred to the reserved matters a lot. Can we just clarify that it is possible to call in reserved matters for committee and that is done by councillors and members of the public can request that?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, so reserved matters applications are go on the weekly list, which obviously comes out to members. So, and also we'll obviously notify ward councillors when that application comes in. So, the application can be called in just like any other planning application.
Thank you, Councillor Garner.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for the presentation. Yes, in fact, I remember the 5 or 6 of us sat on the committee here when we decided on the reserved matters application for the 153 houses that have been built on that site. You gave a good overview of the history, Ian, of the rejection and going to appeal and then getting approved, and then the reserved matters coming forward to us. And many of us, when we heard the reserved matters application, we weren't happy about it because this area has been an established woodland for many, many years, and none of us were happy that it was that we were going to lose so many of the trees for these houses to be built, but they were. One of the things that assuaged many of us about this was some of the conditions that were put on that reserved matters application, specifically condition 3, which, as you have mentioned, was an ecological management plan, a woodland management plan, which was going to, and it quite explicitly, I've been looking at it, explicitly mentions this area here that we're talking about as being actively managed as a woodland. And I know you've mentioned the KCC ecology report. I've had a good look at the KCC ecology report, which I'm sure lots of us have, and it does specifically say the submitted site does not enable the woodland management proposed as part of application R20174, i.e. the previous one, to be fully implemented, and the proposal will result in a direct loss of woodland. So this, we have to either accept or not, that if we agree this outline proposal, this is a further loss of woodland, and that goes significantly, for me, against the grain, and I'm sure it does for a number of others. So I'd be interested to hear what any other members who think this doesn't go against the grain, to hear their reasoning about that. So that's my main concern, I think. There are a couple of other concerns that I want to raise separate to the woodland issue. One of these is one you haven't mentioned, and I know it's one that isn't often talked about, but Kent Police have stated they've got grave concerns about the location of this proposed development for various reasons, and they feel that there should be significant changes to enable to plan out crime, I think they call it. And you've also mentioned the highways issues. Now I know through speaking, I mean, one of the good things about the site, about the housing site there, the 153 houses, is there are quite a large number of families who live there. It's a lot of them are, if not all of them, are affordable homes, and so there are a lot of families live there. And I know through talking to them quite regularly, they contact me about issues with the highways. That Porthole Lane, getting across Porthole Lane to and from school for a lot of these youngsters is a significant issue. And I know I've spoken to you previously, and I've mentioned it before, about having a crossing point there, and I hear what you say about how it might impact traffic flow. Well, I can tell you how it would impact traffic flow. Having a crossing point there would impact traffic flow by making it significantly safer for the children and their families when they go to school and when they come home from school. So I would like to think that even if it couldn't be accommodated with this proposal, it would be looked at favourably going forward, because I don't think we'd want to wait until one of the youngsters or one of the family members was hit by the traffic flow on Porthole Lane, and so I would hope that would happen. But my serious concern, which I'm sure a number of us share, is about this loss of woodland. So thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just to come back on a couple of points. So on the police comment, so the police comment specifically raised concerns about about the boundary treatments being insufficient, loss of secondary emergency access into the housing site estate, and about the parking bays and how it might lead to sort of further parking pressure. And also then the original comment has sort of more generic, I suppose, concerns about the development. So the last condition that we've proposed to put on the application, which is condition 26, requires that within the reserved matters application, it has to be demonstrated about how the layout and design meets secured by design. Specifically, that's the Kent Police standard with regards to how design is trying to sort of design out crime. Obviously, the boundary treatments are not a matter that's actually been defined through this application. That's going to obviously come at part of the reserved matters. In terms of the loss of the emergency access, this isn't proposing any change to the emergency access. I don't particularly think that is an actual emergency access this is utilised. Now, I don't know of the history in terms of what's been maybe put forward in the 153 houses application, but there's no proposal to change the arrangement at this point. So we do think those matters can be sort of overcome at reserve matter stage. And in terms of the cases you comment which states about the loss of the woodland, I think the concern that they've raised specifically obviously is about the fact that if this site is developed for this, then it's not going to be part of the wider woodland management plan that is currently obviously in force via that condition. There isn't a proposal within this that would actually result at this point in the direct loss of trees. We're not confirming that, but that has been indicated that it may affect this area here, where it basically would be thinned out. So that's to the sort of north of the L shape, if I go back to this one. So in the area immediately next to where the dwelling is. But we do consider that by putting on condition 13, specifically requiring in the reserve matters to have basically the woodland area to be managed, identified, the overview of the habitat creation works, we basically get the methodology of establishing habitats, the maintenance timetable, details of ongoing monitoring, details of who implements the habitat creation and how it's funded, that effectively what we're doing is we are replicating the woodland management plan but on a smaller scale and more precise in terms of this area. Certainly, obviously, Casey's comment, they are concerned about the lighting, as I mentioned, because obviously you're going to have lights in closer proximity with the woodland, and I think that's probably informed their comment that they are concerned that it would result in the loss of that area. But that is something that we think can be overcome with particular design. Again, with that point about secured by design, how do you deal with the security aspect whilst also looking after that woodland? But we think the conditions, I suppose, are sufficient, but obviously we'll see what I'm saying. Thanks.
Okay, now I had a flurry of hands go up, so without any prejudice of order, I'm going to start with Councillor Bayford.
Thank you, Chair. In principle, I think a 60-bed care home would be most beneficial to the area. However, I'd just like some clarification. Going back again to the Westwood Lodge Woodland Management and Diversity Plan 21, stated that the woodland on completion of the 153 house estate would be reverted to woodland. Now, from what you said tonight, is it the case that the application site was never included in that? Thank you.
So this is the image from the woodland management plan. So it is, in terms of reverting to woodland, what was shown in the management plan effectively was in these particular areas there's a schedule within the woodland management plan which indicates the works that would occur within those areas. Now, as part of area 3, it basically identifies that the area, again the area of trees, to be thinned by 30%, focusing on sycamore and non-native saplings, timber to be stacked into hybernicals and brash to be chipped on woodland floor, ivy to be removed from the woodland floor, and then replanted with a mixture of native trees to create a more biodiverse woodland. So the reading that certainly I take from that management plan, and certainly the intention would be that the areas of woodland within each area have got specific works that have been outlined that would need to occur. There is no indication within the management plan that the area which is hard sanding was to be removed and returned as woodland, and that's certainly not, me reading the plan that was approved by condition, I certainly wouldn't say that that's an indication that I take from the wording. Ultimately as well, it is really important that members need to consider the fact that it is a previously developed site, so irrespective of what a previous application has suggested is going to happen, we have to consider it on the basis that the principle of development, of developing a previously developed land site, is acceptable depending on what the uses are, etc. So, again, it's the balance. We don't want any more trees to be lost because to the north of this particular area, they are protected trees in that area. So this area here, and that's why obviously the vast majority of development. That's why this sort of the square is as it is. That's where the hard standing was that you saw. So that's the area primarily to be developed.
Councillor Ozeki.
Thank you, Chair. In principle, it seems like a good idea. Care home, certainly a care home is required. We need more in Thanet. We have an old elderly population and very few beds for them to to get to. So certainly a care home would be good use of the land. But the one thing I would like to bring back is the crossing on Poorhole Lane. You say the county council saying that, or highways are saying no, we don't require it. I'm sorry, but looking at it and knowing the area fairly well, having driven through it millions of times, a crossing would be something I would put down as a requirement in reserved matters. So if anyone was to bring that back to us with reserved matters without a crossing, then I'd question it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Just, I suppose, to confirm, so the outline application, I don't have the detail with me, but the outline application looked at highway mitigation in regards to the 153 houses. Specifically, there was a financial contribution as part of that scheme, which was approved at appeal, which went towards highways works in the area. I believe it actually included possibly the Star Lane crossing that's gone in, but I'll see if I can find that out. Although ultimately it's not actually relevant in the sense of what this application is for and whether or not actually this application requires mitigation, and it would be reasonable of us to ask for something like that. I understand the concerns certainly, and Councillor Garner, you've outlined obviously the concerns about about if there is unsafe crossing. What you have at the moment is you've got tactiles on the edge of basically each point in the roundabout. I think, again, most members will be very familiar with this bit of the network. So this is obviously an image from a while ago when the road was actually the development was occurring. In terms of, again, the pedestrian movements from this care home and whether or not that justifies a care home, justifies a crossing, the number of pedestrian movements that have been put forward for the number of staff and visitors is going to become nowhere close to justifying the need for a crossing in and of itself. I understand the concerns about crossing in this area, and to Councillor Garner's point, in terms of pursuing with the County Council a more strategic solution to this area to improve pedestrian movement, I certainly would think that this is not going to harm that by approving this. And we're certainly not disregarding it as something that might be needed more broadly. But as a resultant impact from this care home, it simply wouldn't be reasonable in our view to require it.
Councillor Keane.
Thank you. I'm glad I came up then, because one of my issues is that we are assuming that the people who are resident in the care home never go out. And I mean, is that reasonable that 60 residents will all be bed-bound or something and not leave the building? So that's one of my points, that, we need to be considering the residents, and especially because they will be older people, that there needs to be a safe place for them to cross. But also I'd like to just query the parking, because the public speaker suggested that the home could cater for various types of residents with differing medical needs, which would surely affect the staff numbers. So how do we arrive at staff numbers, when the actual type of home could be different and therefore could cause more car movements? Thank you.
Thank you. I'll come back on that last point. In terms of the detail of, for example, the layout of the building, so in terms of if the layout of the building would give you some indication of the type of care that might need to be provided, obviously it's going to lay out for 60 beds. It would give an indication then of whether or not the parking amount, which obviously has been put forward on a notional basis given the staff numbers that have been put forward as part of the transport statement, obviously that would be something that reserved matters, that we would try and make sure that there is enough parking to accommodate it. Ultimately, we're looking at the principle of development and the number of, for this type of floor space, how many staff you would be expected to have. It is the case that we don't have the specifics about the exact type of care that would be provided ultimately in terms of when this goes to the market and a provider comes forward. They would have to be working on the basis that they are likely to only have 18 spaces, of which 6 of them are for are for staff. So part of it is going to be informed by the application getting approved, if it's approved, as to what type of care goes there and whether or not it fits the requirements of those care providers. I think the point about residents, it is not anticipated that there would be a significant number of movements from the residents of the care home. If they are there, the care homes are obviously trying to, in lots of instances, cater for a wide range of services that are there. Now, obviously, that doesn't mean that there won't be movements, and we certainly are not saying that. Obviously, most of the trips that would be made or likely to expected to be made when people are leaving the site may well be, via car rather than anything else, or taxi, etc., to healthcare providers elsewhere, etc. So, it is something that's looked at. Care homes, C2 uses are specifically looked at in the parking standards for KCC. So they do accommodate that within the assessment of how much parking is needed. And again, it is a balance between trying to fill the site and get as much parking as you can, but obviously the balance here is that we don't want to obviously go into the areas of trees. So we have tried to get a bit of a balance between the parking, the building mass, and also the trees in a sense. So it is a balanced recommendation on that basis.
Councillor Matterface.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just point out, it does say 60 beds, but we're not talking about wards, we're actually talking about bedrooms, which may well have en suite. So it just sounds like when you talk about 60 beds, they're sort of all lined up. But care homes, as you know, don't operate like that. But I wanted to pick up Councillor Garner's point about Poor Hall Lane. The traffic flow along Poor Hall Lane is such that you can't turn right if you're coming from Broadstairs into Forest Drive. Which was Sycamore Lane on your plan, you have to go up to the roundabout. So KCC has decided that people turning right in the middle of Poor Hall Lane into that estate is not a very good idea. So you have to go up, you have to go around the roundabout, which is often very congested, and then come back down and go in on your left. Just a point for clarification, because both Councillor Garner and I have visited there wearing completely different hats, and we're well aware of that. I know there's a play area quite close by. It isn't on your map. Do you have any indication of how close this is? I'm just thinking about children playing and people maybe complaining, because there was a reference in one of the objections to the play area. The play area, I think, is to the left when you go in Forest Drive.
Yes, that's correct. So the play area is basically between the bank of TPO trees at the rear, and then it's basically behind the trees, effectively, there.
Final question before we let other people talk. Where is this in relation to Westwood Lodge? Because, I know where the entrance pillars are to Westwood Lodge, but I'm not sure in relation to your plan where Westwood Lodge is on close to that development.
So
is it the top?
So can you see my mouse circling frantically in this area here? Basically, Westwood Lodge is here. The cottage is down here next to the entrance road, where it says Area 6 is sort of next to where the cottage is. So, and then obviously the actual gates themselves, which are also listed, are next to Slow Lane on the left-hand side of the image.
One is to the left of this development, the other is well to the right. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. I have Councillor Alban next, please.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of questions. In relation to the condition that was put on the 135 houses site for new woodland, let's put it that way, that was put on obviously by the appeal inspector. Was there any, as part of that condition, was there a time limit on when that should be implemented, and if there was, is that's obviously not being complied with?
So the woodland management plan came as part of the reserve matters, which was the condition that was on there. There is within the management plan itself, it outlines the timescale to which the work should occur. Now, in a lot of instances, the work is occurring over a period of 8, 10 onwards years. So as the site is now complete, effectively, or pretty much there, it now moves into the stage of whether or not they are according, the wider site, excluding this area as part of it, whether or not they are according with the woodland management plan. So, and if there are concerns, obviously, that those measures that were put in place are not being accorded with, like anything else, then it's a planning enforcement issue.
So, just effectively, that condition is still alive?
Yes.
turned it off. The other thing I wanted to ask is in relation to, I take it that any financial contributions of the application would be dealt with under the reserve matters?
No, so there are no financial contributions that are being proposed. So the one thing that might be required for this type of residential accommodation would potentially be a SAMS contribution, but in this instance it's not required because of the nature of those residents that are there, that it's not going to result in recreational disturbance at Pegwell Bay and the coast. But there won't be any other provision for contributions because of the type of accommodation, because it's not a C3 residential dwelling house, it's not flat development, therefore it doesn't have the impact on schools, etc. and so on.
Can I come back to you? I suppose what's lurking at the back of my mind is that obviously they'll have staff here and the elderly people who will be there, and I think Councillor Rizekis wants to reserve a room there by the sound of it. But I think the other concern that concerns us all when we're dealing with large applications, and this is not particularly a large application, but it's big enough. We've got elderly people who have a lot of medical needs. Why I was asking about any financial contributions would be in relation to a doctor's surgery, which I think the more the houses are going up, the less doctors we have. So that was the reason why I was asking for that. So that does concern me. And lastly, to get on to the actual, well, not lastly really, it's certainly got another one. I think it's too high. I think the three-storey building is too high. I think the impact of that on Poor Old Lane is quite heavy. Easily seen looking at the drawing. But certainly, as Councillor Garner has said, I've lived here since 1973, and this area of Westwood has always had a lovely woodland area, slowly getting developed, slowly removing the trees, and I think it's a shame. So I'm still mulling this over, Chair, so thank you.
Just because I didn't talk about it that much in the presentation, I think if I may just come back on the height point. So our view is that there are obviously various commercial buildings that are taller than this in the area. Although, it's worth noting, obviously, that when you move round into Ramsgate Road and you're looking at the residential properties, there are bungalows on one side, then two-storey properties on the other side. So there's varying heights in and around this scheme. Obviously, this would result in a building that is, directly fronting Porthole Lane, even if you wouldn't be able to access it from Porthole Lane. And so it will have a presence, certainly. Obviously, you are opposite. It's Casper's, and then obviously you've got the more commercial warehouse type buildings. So in terms of visual amenities of the area, we don't think this necessarily would be an incongruous feature necessarily by being a three-storey building. Obviously, and it will depend on the detail of the design. Specifically, what's been put forward is two-storey with a mansard which has accommodation within it. So the point would be whether or not how articulated that is, how far it is set back, and ultimately that would be part of the considerations, again, of a reserve matters application.
Councillor Kay Bright.
Thank you, Chair. I'm in two minds about this one still. I mean, I'm fine with the heritage bits that Ms Livingston just talked about. I'm also fine with the pressures on the doctor's surgery, because this is very close, obviously, to the NHS hub that we approved last month. I'm still not 100% clear on whether it's a brownfield site or whether it's a woodland site. I know I get the hard standing element, but I was extremely uncomfortable recently when we as a committee approved the felling of woodland, and I get really concerned when I hear things about thinning trees. And so I guess my only question, because I think everyone has raised the points that initially concerned me, I think the only question I really still have is around the completed development of the houses, and you talked about things like log piles, and is that all there? Has that actually been put in place yet? Things like log piles and the little bits of biodiversity net gain things, that whether it's that or not, or pre-exist that, are those things been put in place? Because I think that's a good signal of whether the developer is kind of keeping to their side of the bargain on that one.
So I suppose just to pick up the last point, this isn't the same developer necessarily, I think, is the important point. So in terms of a separate thing. So in terms of that, I'm afraid I can't confirm whether or not all those different things are there. I think certainly as part of this application and raising the issues of the woodland management plan, it's something, certainly what we do is we go and visit all of the housing sites when they're under construction and then when they're completed to check through the conditions and whether or not they've accorded with it. And this is one of those sites that's basically on the list to go and see whether or not they have done everything they say they were going to do. In terms of the point about whether or not the site is brownfield or woodland, it's both. It's brownfield in the sense of obviously that part of it. Yeah, no, it's not particularly helpful. I appreciate. Ultimately, where this hard standing is that you can see was developed land. There were buildings on this site, and it was used, for a commercial business. However, because of the site area, which you can see here is the red line, you can see that the red line does include woodland. So it is about trying to ensure that the development that occurs on the bit that doesn't have the woodland on it as much as possible, and obviously ensuring that in the reserve matters, when we get all the details of the landscaping, that if there is the need for any of the woodland to be basically looked at to be lost, that one, we are resisting that, but also if there is the need to remove certain trees, which obviously the woodland management plan indicated that trees were going to be thinned because there are sycamores and non-native species, so they were going to come out. Ultimately, then it's about actually trying to ensure that we get the level of planting that was obviously put forward in the woodland management plan to try and ensure that we can retain as much area as shown and as before. But it would allow for an additional use on the site that obviously wasn't part of that outline application for 153, but we do think there are obviously benefits that come with this proposal, that do outweigh those concerns, as long as the conditions are accorded with that we're proposing.
Councillor Wing.
Thank you. I think any opportunity to put a crossing there should be taken. I agree that our roads are not safe at all, and if you look at the crash data and the number of fatalities and serious incidents on our roads, then any opportunity to put a crossing needs to be grabbed with both hands or heavily supported. I'm assuming the bus routes are okay, because otherwise Councillor Matterface would have brought that up. But I am a bit disappointed about maybe not necessarily. Okay, it's a brownfield site within a forest site. So I'm a bit disappointed that the build doesn't really try and live within that site. So I would have liked to have seen some sedum roofs. The 3 stories, whatever way you look at the light, it's going to impact on the wildlife that lives in that woodland. I understand that we don't have a tree officer, and that the tree officer with the consultant we use is not Thanet based, so I would hope that tree officer has actually done a site visit. But I'd like to know just how many trees does he think are actually at risk, and what is the likelihood that those trees will be lost. I've got concerns about the woodland management plan. You said this is a new developer, so does this new developer take responsibility for a new woodland management plan for this particular area? How does the previous woodland management plan for this area fit in with a potentially new woodland management plan? Also, biodiversity net gain. I'm assuming that this application will need to increase biodiversity by 10%, and I can't really see how they're going to do this on that site. Is there any information on that, Ian?
So the application came before the statutory requirement for 10%. So that's why it doesn't. Just to come back on one point, the developer of this site would take on the responsibility for everything within the red line, and obviously the woodland management plan that we are requiring to come in as part of the reserve matters would have to cover the extent of the red line. So in terms of it would sit independently of the other one, but we wouldn't, because of approving a new one, we wouldn't enforce the old one. Do you know what I mean? This would replace this area in terms of the woodland management plan. The woodland management plan on the old application would still exist for the rest of the site, but effectively we'd be replacing it with a new one, specifically tailored around mitigating the impacts of this development rather than the previous one.
So I'm making the assumption that it wouldn't be any less of a woodland management plan, that it would be at least equal to the previous woodland management plan.
Well, that would be our intention of what comes in. Obviously, ultimately, they would submit it and we would have to consider it. I would certainly put forward the view that given the extent of discussion, that the scrutiny on it you would expect the standard to be the same, if not better.
Also, net zero, I'm making the assumption that the building will be built to modern standards, so super insulated, but possibility of solar, grey water harvesting, will there be any electric charging points, cycle facilities for workers to come in on?
So in terms of building control requirements would require EV charging points for non-allocated spaces. So there would be requirements for EV charging. In terms of, you mentioned sedum roofs in the previous comment as well. So there is no requirement in policy, planning policy that is, to get those things automatically. However, obviously they are things that would be considered at the reserve matter stage. So when the design of the building comes out, opportunities such as that need to be taken. There is also the issue of drainage on the site, and there is a condition related to drainage, and there are queries that have been raised by KCC as the local lead flood authority that will need dealing with when precisely looking at the landscaping, the hard surfacing, and also obviously the design of the building in terms of reducing the rate of flow for surface water, as well as looking at infiltration on the site. So as part of those measures, there may also be the opportunity for other things when this comes forward. But I'm sorry to keep repeating myself, but it's all going to be part of the reserve matters application.
I do understand that, but the developer or the applicant is in the room, and hopefully they will have listened to our concerns about woodlands and this building sitting within a woodland. So hopefully the reserve matters, what comes in, will reflect our concerns in this room. Thank you.
And I assume that the trees outside of the red line will also be covered by the existing management plan in that case. Councillor Matterface.
Very quickly, I didn't need to raise anything about buses because the loop goes down Ramsgate Road. So that is one site that you don't have a problem. Could you just go back to the Google one that showed Star Lane roundabout, please? It was the one you had before that one. Yeah. As I said, if you come up Poorhole Lane from the Westwood Road end, you have to go past the access to that site, go up to the roundabout, go round the roundabout, and then come back and then turn in left, which is a bit of an issue if it's an emergency vehicle, unless they're coming obviously straight down the Ramsgate Road. You can't turn right down what is labelled Sycamore Lane, it's now Forest Drive. Just that illustrates it quite nicely. Thank you.
Councillor Garner.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate you letting me have another quick word, because you've sort of highlighted my concern towards the end there about the superseding of the woodland management plan. We've got a really good woodland management plan as a result of the reserve matters application that has specifically outlined what we agreed that we would see done in each of these areas. And as you pointed out, this is area 3, which I won't read it all out, but there's no mention of any building there. There is mention of trees being planted, of hedgerow being planted, and at the end it says area 3 will also have an area of high value tussock grassland for birds, reptiles and mammals that will be managed as per the prescription on a later page. So if that needs to take a priority, because we said it would take a priority when we approved the reserved matters application. And by the way, you were right about the pedestrian crossing that was, as it shows there, the pedestrian crossing has actually been put on Star Lane that was paid for by this development of his. Thank you.
Okay, that's the last of the speakers, so we will now put the motion for the officer's recommendation for approval to the vote. Those in favour, please show. And those against? So that is lost. Were there any abstentions? No, thank you. Okay, we just need to take a brief adjournment while we write a new motion to take account of a decision that does need to be made. So is there anyone who wants to come and help write that motion, would like to come up and join us and help us write it, please? Thank you. Okay, as you know, we have to write our own motion to replace the one that's just been refused, and Councillor Garner is now going to outline his proposed motion, and then I will be asking for a seconder for that.
Thank you. So after that in-depth discussion with Mr Livingstone, I'm going to propose that we defer this for officers to come back, to report back with potential reasons for refusal related around a loss of trees, the impact on the woodland management plan that was agreed with the reserve matters, around heritage issues that were raised by one or two people that the conservation officer had raised, and also highway safety. So potential reasons there as well. So I'm proposing that.
Seconded by Councillor Alban, thank you. Does anyone want to debate that motion, or do we just go straight for the vote? Straight for the vote, thank you. All those in favour? Any against? And any abstentions? Thank you. Motion's carried, sorry. Okay, so moving on to the next item on the agenda, which is Cliff Cottage, Herschel Road, Birchington. Public speaking in favour of the application is Mr Gullick. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. My name's David Gullick. I represent the architects for this application. Consent was granted for a residential block consisting of 6 units with associated parking in 2007. This was renewed in 2010. Just to be clear, this current application replicates the earlier consented scheme in height, footprint and massing. The interior layout has a slight modification to comply with updated building control for the lift core and the staircase, and the flats that are proposed meet the national prescribed space standards. Initial discussions with the planning department focused on significant changes in planning policy since the original application, since that was approved. Other than the biodiversity net gain, little was identified that required action, and the application should be seen in the context of the change in policy affecting the residential development over the last 15 years. During the planning process, we've worked with the refuse department to ensure there is a suitable strategy for bin collection, and have also introduced car charging to address the comments from the parish council, who supported the application, apart from that one thing. The immediate owner to the north at Little Place has been consulted through the process, and relevant notices served. Comments raised by the planning officer on overlooking, parking and access were addressed in the course of the consultation. There have been no other objections from strategy consultees. On the biodiversity net gain, we have shown that a 10% improvement can be achieved on site, although there is more work to be done to that, and that is covered in the report. The relevant policy and guidance is set out in the positive comments in the planning officer's report, and highlights requirement for housing in urban areas. We also note the comments from the planning officer regarding the implementation of the original application based on the demolition of the earlier property when the application was live. As this application seeks to replicate the original, we trust that we've satisfied the requirements of the planning department and made adjustments to address any comments in changes in policy. Thank you.
Thank you. Speaking against the application, Mr Piper, you also have 3 minutes.
Good evening, Chair and Planning Committee. My wife and I live at York House, to the left of this application site. we have two main objections. The first is the effect on the character and appearance of the area. The building would be 12 metres high, not 10.6 metres as stated in the officer's report. Our house is 9 metres to the ridge and Little Place on the other side is 8 metres. This is a far taller building than others in the road and occupies almost the entire width of the plot. In a 2010 appeal at Little Place next to this site, the inspector considered that the proposed building was overly wide in relation to the size of the plot, and its cramped appearance was emphasised further because of the scheme's imposing and striking modern design. He dismissed the appeal because of the harm to the character and appearance of the area. The application is similar and should be judged on a similar basis to the 2010 appeal decision. The second is the living conditions. The rear of the site is a proposed car park with 8 spaces. The report refers to the potential to increase noise levels, but only considers vehicle movements and ignores other noise like the playing of in-car music, animated conversations, car doors shutting, all in a quiet back garden area and sometimes late at night or early morning. The report makes no reference to the 3 properties in Berkeley Road, very close to the back of the site. If you look at the plan or aerial image, you will see that number 10 is built right up to the boundary. There is no recognition of this and the significant amount of overlooking to all 3 of those properties or the impact of the noise and disturbance from the car park. This is a serious omission in the assessment of the application. The shared amenity space for the 6 flats at the back of the building will be close to our private rear garden at the back of our house. This small area is likely to be used extensively and intensively by the occupiers of the 6 flats. The use of the car park and amenity area and the intensification of activity from 6 households will have a significant and harmful impact upon the living conditions of those on either side and the 3 homes at the back. In conclusion, circumstances have changed since permission was granted in 2007. It is not clear whether the pre-commencement conditions have been discharged and a lawful start made. It should not be seen as a fallback position. It is important to take into account the 2010 dismissed appeal on the land adjacent for similar development to this, and there is an additional significant harm to the living conditions of the existing residents of 5 properties. I ask the committee to refuse the application because of its significant adverse impact upon the character and appearance of the area and the very harmful effect upon the living conditions of nearby residents. If the committee are not prepared to refuse the permission today, then I think it's imperative that they consider their representations and visit the site before coming to a decision. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I will now hand over to the Principal Planning Officer to outline the report.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the application site outlined in red as usual. There is some blue land in this location here, which is land which is in the ownership of the applicant but does not form part of the application site. The surrounding area, as you can see from this plan, is mainly residential in nature. And we have the Birchington-on-Sea Bowls and Tennis Club here in this location. So this is an aerial image of the site and surrounding areas. The application site is in this location here. This is York House and Little Place in this location here. And again, the bowling club and tennis courts in that location. So some photographs. This is looking down Herschel Road and the application site is on the right-hand side here. And this is the bowling court, bowling ground, bowling green, sorry, in this location. This is standing on Herschel Road looking at the application site, so you can see this is York House here and the properties that have been talked about to the rear in Berkeley Road. And this is, again, looking at the application site with York House behind it. And looking the other way, you've got the application site in this location and Little Place here. And this is a view actually from Beach Avenue looking across to the application site, which is in this location here between York House and Little Place, looking across the bowling green. So, as has been mentioned, this is the proposed block plan. So this would be the building here, access coming from the north of Dallinger Road. as has been mentioned, there was a previous application that was granted in 2007, but a time extension for the times the extension of the time to implement the application was granted in 2010. So this is the old site location plan for that development. So it's similar in nature. You have the proposed block plan, the proposed building in this location here, parking around the site. This is the front elevation of that, which was approved in 2007. This is York House here and a little place there. So it is quite modern. It had gabled and balconies and bay windows. And this is the rear elevation that was approved in 2007. And again, it was, as has been mentioned, an actual application for the 3-storey building containing 6 two-bedroom flats, so the same as we're considering at the moment. And this is just the street scene of that as approved. So this is York House here, the proposed development, or the development approved in 2007, and Little Place here. And this is just a floor plan, the ground floor plan of that approved scheme, where there were 2 flats essentially on each floor, as has been mentioned by the agent. That the internal layout has slightly changed, but we'll look at that as we go through it. Sorry. So this is a site plan for the development. As has been mentioned, access comes down from Dallinger Road here onto the site, and the swept path that you can see here is actually for a 13-metre bin lorry, and just showing that it comes down on Dallinger Road, and bins would be moved on bin collection day to this location here, which is within 15 metres of Dallinger Road, so they could be collected. So zooming in on this plan, we can see here that the layout is pretty similar to what was approved previously. We have the main building in this location here, and it sits in line with the building line of Little Place and York House. We have the access road and the parking areas around here and here. And we have a building here which is for cycle storage, which we'll look at. And we have some garden and amenity space within the site as well. This might be slightly easier for members to see in terms of the site layout as proposed. So as you can see, there is amenity space here, a total of 8 parking spaces, so 6 along here, 2 here, and green space, and that building here is the cycle store. So looking at the front elevation, we have looked at it, and the ridge height we have measured off is 10.6 metres, and the materials are quite modern and quite contemporary looking in nature. Materials would be a grey tiled roof, render and natural wood cladding. So it's quite obvious from this drawing where those materials would be, but mainly render with some elements of wood cladding. So this is the north-facing elevation of the proposed building. So this will face onto Little Place. To the northern boundary, there's a separation distance of 3.1 metres but it is noted that whilst Little Place has a number of openings in its southern side, which would face onto this elevation, there is an existing terrace around a neighbouring property and outbuildings between the main side elevation of Little Place and the boundary with this site. So it is in fact a total separation distance of 9.9 metres from the closest point of this building, now proposed to the side elevation of the neighbouring property, so the side elevation of Little Place itself. And given the separation distances and the intervening outbuildings, it is considered that there would be no loss of light or sense of enclosure to the occupiers of Little Place. And it is noted there are some oriel windows to the side elevations, and the rear part of those oriel windows would actually be obscure glazed, with the front of those oriel windows facing onto the front towards the bowling green and tennis courts. So it's not considered with those obscure windows and the fact, the high nature of these roof lights, that there would be any overlooking to Little Place from the proposed development. So looking at the other side elevation, so this faces York House. Again, there are a number of openings in the northern side elevation of York House that do front onto the proposed development, sorry. But from looking at the arrangement of these openings and a recent plan for an extension at York House, it is considered that these are secondary windows that they serve non-habitable rooms. And given that the proposed building would not extend significantly beyond the rear elevation of York House, and again, given the fact that the oriel windows, the rear section would be obscure glazed, and the height of the roof lights, it is not considered there would be a significant loss of light or sense of enclosure or overlooking to the occupants of York House. So this is the rear elevation. So there are a number of windows, but it's very similar as to what was approved in 2007. And as has been mentioned, the rear neighbour, particularly number 10 Berkeley Road, has built development across a large part of its rear boundary. And given that arrangement, it's noted that these windows would not be looking onto garden land, but to built form. And it is considered that given the separation distance and the fact that the first floor bay windows, so these ones here, will have obscure glass, it is not considered that there would be any sense of enclosure or overlooking to the properties in the rear. So just looking at the floor plans, again, this is the ground floor plan as proposed. So we do have two flats on each level, and as you go up, they pretty much take a similar form. And these are the oriel windows that we mentioned earlier. So the rear portions of both of those oriel windows would be obscure glazed to prevent overlooking to the gardens to the property either side. And then we have the second floor. So this is the site, the street scene, sorry. So you can see York House in this location here, and very faint, unfortunately, but that is Little Place in this location here. So it is recommended that we do approve the application. The proposal would bring 6 additional units of accommodation to the district's accommodation, which would make a contribution, to the district's housing supply, and now it is within a sustainable location. Permission has been referenced, already been granted in 2007, and this development is very similar in terms of its design, scale, layout and access to that previously approved and accepted on site. And whilst a significant period of time has passed since those previous applications, the 2007 approval originally and the extension of time for the implementation of it in 2010, and there have been changes in policy, it is considered that significant weight could still be given to the previous permissions as they appear to have been implemented, because the property that was on site has been demolished. It is acknowledged that the proposed building would be larger than the immediate adjacent properties and would be visible in long views from the surrounding area. And there would also be changes in light and outlook and the potential of views towards neighbouring properties, along with an increase in activity on the site. But it's not considered in terms of noise and disturbance and comings and goings, etc., generated from site, that they would be significant and have an adverse impact on surrounding occupiers. The impact of the development upon the special protection area, so the SAM contribution, has been mitigated via the submission of a legal agreement. And that agreement also includes a contribution towards additional play space in the district to mitigate against the lack of doorstep play space on this particular development. As has been heard, biodiversity net gain is required for this site, and the 10% can be achieved on site, and that would be secured through biodiversity net gain requirements and conditions that relate to that. So the recommendation is to approve. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I move that the officer's recommendation is adopted. Would the Vice Chair please second?
Seconded.
Thank you. And first speaker I have is Councillor Alban.
Thank you, Chair. I think this development sits nicely in that plot. I think the design is fine. They've taken into account any potential overlooking. Either side have got obscure glazing. And I think it's a nice development. I should be voting for it. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Kay-Bright.
I agree to a large extent with Councillor Alban. I also think it's good that it's flats, not an HMO. I think I have a question around the parking. Why the parking is at the rear of the building rather than the front? Is there no room at the front? Can I have a look at the plan of the? Yeah, that's probably the best one. If you go, that's probably the best one. So is that? I guess my one concern is that kind of rear amenity space that is shared is going to have traffic there. That would be my one concern with it, is why is the parking at the rear where cars are going to be going down? And I kind of don't buy the number of journeys is going to be every day, but why are cars going down into that gap between the houses into effectively a back garden rather than out the front? That's my.
Sorry, it's two things. I assume it's following the previous approval that was granted, but also it keeps the building in line with the two surrounding occupiers, and there is a visual implication as well. If the parking was all set out in the front, it would be a lot of hard surfacing and instead of building to the front.
Understood. The other question is this a heritage area or conservation area or anything?
No, it's not a conservation area, and there are no sort of listed buildings in close proximity.
Councillor Bayford.
Thank you, Chair. I also think the development is well planned, and I think in view of what's already been agreed, I really don't think there are many planning reasons that would justify refusing this application. Thank you.
Councillor Wing.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to take up on Councillor Bright's concerns. Do the other houses park by the side of their houses? Is that where most of the homes on the street, do they park in their back gardens also, or do they have parking by the side of their properties?
It's kind of to the side, if you can look at these, and drives coming down the side. So it's mainly, well, depending on the where it's facing, but there's a garden area to the rear there, but it looks like parking coming down York House there and again to the side of Little Place.
So I can't envisage any situation that I've ever come across where people drive down the side of the house and park in the bottom of the garden. And I'd also like to know how that impacts on the biodiversity net gain, which we didn't have in 2007, but we have here, because a large part of the garden is now going to be tarmacked over. And I believe the concept of biodiversity net gain would have gone back to what the site originally looked like even before the previous application, which would have had a garden rather than parking.
So in terms of, obviously it's the development of flats, and ultimately that's dictated why they're trying to propose to provide parking for each of the flats on site. And that does result in developments that do occur in this manner. The question, I suppose, is whether or not providing parking at the rear causes either an impact on the character and appearance of the area that would be contrary to policy, or whether or not there is an impact on living conditions of residential properties surrounding there. This issue obviously was considered in the previous 2007 application, but it is accepted that that is quite some time ago. I would say, though, that policy D1 that was in force from the 2006 local plan is very, very similar to policy QDO2, which is our character and appearance policy, and the MPPF hasn't specifically stressed anything in fact that obviously that has also come in the period between that would indicate that there is harm by virtue of having parking at the rear in and of itself, especially when you won't be able to see it from the public realm. In terms of the impact on neighbouring properties, the number of movements of vehicles would be low because it's not a lot of dwellings here, so and obviously they are low speed movements that would be occurring. Obviously you've heard concerns from residents about potential noise created by cars, not just the movement of cars but people in and out of cars. That in and of itself isn't the development itself wouldn't necessarily automatically result in that sort of nature and behaviour to warrant a refusal in terms of impact on neighbours, because again you're looking at a relatively small number of people. To your point about biodiversity net gain, absolutely that is a different aspect of what's being of what's sort of changed. So in terms of the actual site in itself, it does revert to what it looks like, but because it doesn't actually have that much biodiversity value at the moment, because it's lawn effectively with some boundary, it's actually within the smaller area that they have on the site for landscaping, actually including specifically planting. It is considered that they can get 10% on this site, and they have provided a metric, and again to indicate how they're going to do that. Because of the nature of the way that biodiversity net gain works, you obviously still have to submit after a permission is granted. They still have to then update a new metric and then provide that. We have obviously got additional details, and it is dealt with in the report in itself. But because of the actual almost low ecological value of the site at the moment, it is considered that you can provide that on site without having to lose the parking to provide that. And ultimately, if they can't prove that they're providing 10% on site, then they have to justify why they can't provide it on site in terms of the biodiversity, in terms of the hierarchy. And obviously it has been indicated that they can, even with the parking from what's been submitted.
So could I ask, in the area, do we have any other buildings of this nature, of this height, with parking at the back? Do we have any in that area? Because it would substantially change the nature of the area.
So in terms of parking to the rear, you have developments that's 3-storey in the area. If you're the other side of where the bowling green is, there's developments of 3-storey in that area there. There's parking around the side and larger parking areas for certain developments in the area, which are more akin to the flat developments. Obviously, most of the properties in this area are bungalows or 2-storey properties, which are single dwellings, so they do not have parking at the rear. So in terms of to the point about whether or not it changes the character of the area, we would consider that in terms of, well, how is that experienced for the wider public? Can you see that relationship in the public realm? If obviously that hard surfacing area was clearly visible, say it's a corner plot, it could be considered to be harmful to the character of the area, but because it is actually set behind the building and there wouldn't be public views of that, it's not considered to harm the wider character and appearance of the area that would basically outweigh the benefits of providing 6 flats, in our view.
Okay, I don't have anyone else indicating they want to speak, so we will now put the officer's recommendation for approval to the vote. Those in favour, please show. And those against? And abstentions? Thank you. So the motion is carried. We have reached that 8:15 mark where I normally, between now and 9 o'clock, call for a brief adjournment, so we will take a 5-minute break. All right, welcome back. We're moving on to the next item on the agenda, which is 21 Leyland Road, Margate. I have public speaking against the application. Mr Timpson, you have 3 minutes.
Good evening. I live at 19 Leyland Road. I'm here this evening with some of my neighbours. We're here because this residential family assessment centre means asking us to accept a profound risk to our wellbeing and safety. And nothing I've read in the consultation suggests that anyone appreciates that. The name Residential Family Assessment Centre is quite a cosy term, which I've had to spend a lot of time and energy decoding. This is the reality. 4 families who are judged to be unable to safely look after their children will be moved in there for 12-week periods. They are unable to look after their children because they have serious psychological or drug or social issues. I don't know if you have much experience with people in that situation, but I do, and it's no joke. The idea that this will be just mothers with babies quietly living there is a fantasy. People in this situation are not simple. They're in a chaotic life situation, and that chaotic life situation comes with them wherever they go. Dealers dropping off drugs, profoundly mentally ill people unsupervised for long periods, able to get on the street freely. Violent boyfriends who decide this is the moment they want to see the mother of their child, and vulnerable people whose behaviour cannot be predicted. All in one house. Those issues will be pushed outside. And if you think I'm being hysterical, ask yourself this. The consultation itself recommends 24-hour CCTV inside and out of the house, with body cams for nurses. What kind of a situation do you think requires that? And could you relax living next to it? And if you won't take my word for it, what about the police? There was an identical application to this in Darlington recently that was stopped because of safety concerns. The police consultation said the increase in vulnerable people will have an impact on police services and the safety of residents. They didn't let it go ahead. They decided a residential street was the wrong place. For some reason, this case seems to have been greenlit without breaking stride. If it goes ahead, the simple truth is this. You're asking me and everyone else around 21 Leyland Road to take this risk for you. We will be the ones who have to deal with the consequences. It is not these mothers' fault, but it is the reality. It won't be you taking the risk, and it won't be the owner who's going to move far, far away. It will be my family and my neighbours day in, day out. I have 2 young daughters, and I will have to ask myself every day who is next door and what threat they pose. My daughters won't be playing in their garden ever again. And this will never go away or stabilise, because every 12 weeks a new group of very troubled people will move in and restart the process. Right now, few people around 21 Leyland Road even know this is happening, and even less understand the risk. I'm asking you to delay approving this until you can have a proper conversation with them and ask the proper questions.
Thank you. The Principal Planning Officer will now outline the report. No, Planning Applications Manager.
Thank you, Chair. So the application is for the change of use of a residential dwelling to a residential family assessment centre, which is use class C2. So the application site is outlined in red. So the red marker shows the building itself, so it's quite a large detached dwelling. So we are looking at the property in question here, so with the trees in front, and then another view back towards us. You can see it's got a number of roof alterations, and it's quite a deep detached building. So just another view there, so you can see that there's a garage there and some off-street spaces in front. So you've got a terrace row adjacent to the right-hand side as you look at the property, and then you've got semi-detached properties on the left-hand side of the property as you look at it. So in terms of the existing dwelling, as mentioned, it's quite a large dwelling, so it is a 7-bed dwelling. And the proposed use would indicate 6 bedrooms, but include staff room and then some sort of more normal living spaces downstairs, also with a staff office. So in terms of the proposal itself, so the main issues for members to consider are the principle of development, impact on living conditions of neighbouring properties, impact on character and appearance of the area, and also on highway safety. So in terms of the impact on the character and appearance of the area, from a visual standpoint, there aren't any external alterations being made to the building. So in terms of the actual visual aspect of the character and appearance of the area, there is a neutral impact from the proposal. So as already mentioned, there is the proposal is for short-term supported residential accommodation for up to 12 weeks. There is a condition that's proposed for up to 4 parents and their child and baby, or baby. So we're talking about either 4 individuals or I suppose 2 couples, however you want to sort of work it as a sort of a proportion linked to the, but it's got to be 4 is the maximum. The proposal includes up to 3 staff members working with 12-hour shift patterns, so it's an 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. Sort of change over time. So the proposal outlines that it's to provide care and support to vulnerable parents and children to develop parenting skills. So the application is supported by the KCC Strategic Commissioning Services. So KCC would place people within this facility. They would also regulate and commission this facility as well. Now, one point that's in the report that outlines that there are 3 off-street spaces provided. This is 2 off-street spaces because one includes a garage. So I think it's really important that we take account of the fact that there is the potential for an increase in parking on street, and this is one of the concerns that the residents have raised. In terms of the area itself, there is on-street parking on both sides of the road. There is off-street parking for a number of the dwellings along here, which has the impact of taking obviously vehicles off the road, but it does also obviously have driveways and accesses that obviously people can't therefore park in front of. In terms of the staff numbers, KCC considered that for this type of facility you would require 1 space per 2 staff. We are in close proximity to a bus stop on North Down Park Road. But so to provide 2 off-street spaces, and then with the capacity of the area, it is considered that in the daytime there wouldn't be a problem, and at night time, where you've got the 2 off-street spaces for staff, you wouldn't have the visitors, if there were visitors in terms of professionals going to the site for, say, for example, KCC officers. There wouldn't be a requirement or an impact when more people are home from work, etc. But it is important to consider the traffic, the traffic in the area and whether or not there is an impact on the area. We don't consider there is, and there is no objection from KCC because there is, in our view, sufficient parking. Now, it has been mentioned, obviously, in terms of the concerns raised about the impact on living conditions. So I've outlined about the restriction that's been put on in terms of the number of people within the building. It is a large property, so there is capacity within this for, as I say, 6 bedrooms, but actually with a maximum of 4 parents. It's a detached property, so in terms of staff impact, with the shift pattern, it's not considered that the staffing on themselves would result in significant noise and disturbance because of the number and the comings and goings that would occur on that basis. It has been obviously put forward by the applicant that only professionals and family would visit the property, and to the point that's been raised in terms of concerns about safety and security, it obviously is a supervised environment, which does obviously have the staff present. It's been mentioned obviously in the comments as a response to the police comment from the applicant's submission, the expectation of CCTV within the property and outside the property, which is standard for this type of facility. It is a consideration that this is the type of use, so it's a care and supported housing use, so that is supported by policy HO 18. It is considered that this type of facility is normally found in residential areas. However, obviously it does raise specific concerns that come up from residents in the area about whether or not there is going to be antisocial behaviour as a result of it. In terms of the police's involvement, there is an informative which requires the applicants to discuss the matter with the police. We haven't put a planning condition on the proposal. We're not recommending that because we think the informative is sufficient. If members consider that there is a requirement for a crime prevention condition to address the specific points that are raised, then obviously if members are minded to do that, then they can do that depending on how the discussion goes. It is a highly sustainable location, which again plays into that point about whether or not there is going to be impact on, on highway safety from parking. In terms of the officer consideration and the weighing up of this type of use. It is supported by policy, specifically, as I say, HO 18, and it does meet the criteria specifically for the loss of a residential dwelling because it is supported. You know, it's acknowledged that there are concerns of residents, certainly. However, given the number of users and the staff and the supervision that comes with it being a commissioned premises, it is considered that it would be an appropriate location for this type of use, and therefore it is recommended for approval. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I move that the officer's recommendation is adopted. Would the Vice Chair please second?
Seconded.
Thank you. And I have Councillor Alban.
Thank you, Chair. I do have concerns about this. Obviously, there has to be places like this. It's the way of life, how we are. But I do have concerns for the residents, especially those who live either side of it. Whilst they will have staff there, it is the outside. I think we've seen recently in Cliftonville places where they've got homes and for the homeless people and stuff like that. And nothing against the homeless people, but it's just what it attracts. That building will attract antisocial behaviour like a magnet. That's just my experience, and I do have concerns. And for the police to put these number of conditions that they require, or not require, but say that the building should actually have, is pretty scary, really. In effect, you know, it's kind of like a prison for the people who are in there, and I am concerned that it'll make it a prison for the residents who live either side of it as well, for where they live. So I have concerns, and perhaps I shouldn't say this, but I suggest County Council look somewhere else. Thank you.
Councillor Matterface.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just going to pick up what Councillor Alban said. Looking at the police designing out crime officer, I mean, this is really, as he says, scary. We advise boundary treatments to be 1.8 metres in height with support beams facing inwards so people can't climb over the fence, basically. Any gates to the rear must be securely lockable from both sides. No unauthorised access. I mean, if the police have concerns, I mean, they presumably have experience, because I know we have a couple of these assessment centres in Ramsgate. CCTV, the speaker mentioned that, body-worn video cameras for safety. It does sound really kind of... The police are obviously concerned. They have obviously had dealings with families in this situation. Lighting to cover entrances, parking area to aid in natural surveillance. No, I think what Councillor Alban said, I feel I would want to recommend refusal on this. There's just too many imponderables, quite frankly. Thank you.
Councillor Keane.
Thank you. I think there's a fundamental misunderstanding about what a family assessment centre is, and I know because I've worked in one. And I also know that we have 2 in a residential road in Minster, and there aren't problems there. To go into a family assessment centre, it means a parent or parents, you know, do need help with their parenting, but they've got to sign up for being willing to have that assessment. The assessment wouldn't be recommended if they were using drugs or alcohol. They wouldn't go to a unit of that sort if that was the case. So what you've got are vulnerable families that do need support in parenting, and that social services need the security of knowing that the child is going to be well cared for. for. The purpose of these units is to help them develop those parenting skills. I'm frankly surprised at the police recommendations. Certainly some of them are fair enough because it needs to be a secure unit. Things like CCTV are there for everybody's safety, but it's not because this is a dangerous cohort of people. If there was antisocial behaviour, again, the placement would be ended. The family would be moved on because they're clearly not suitable already for that kind of assessment. So I also think it's actually an important facility for us to have for local parents that need help with their parenting in our area, and I have no problem with this proposal.
Councillor Bayford.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I agree with Councillor Keane. I think a residential family assessment centre is supported by policy and, in my view, very much needed. I think that the inclusion of CCTV is a very positive thing for the safety of everyone. Just a question, is there a maximum age limit for the children who reside there on a temporary basis? Thank you.
I don't have the information on what that would be. Obviously, in terms of it's obviously up to the placement of KCC in terms of, but I think it would be fair to make the assumption we are talking about the youngest of children in terms of that age. But I don't have the information specifically with regards to this premises.
Councillor Rattigan.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, been a Clifton resident myself, I know, and I respect the comments from my peers that we need these centres. I just think it's the wrong location. I'm assuming the landlord is a private landlord as well. It's not even a local authority where you perhaps would have more control over if things did go wrong, where when it's a private landlord. There's a lot of antisocial behaviour going on at Cliftonville at the moment as it is, and where Leyland Road sits, you've got an estate down the bottom where you do get, over the years it's known for that. You also got Cliftonville School and other schools close, sort of nearby. While I'm not against these centres, obviously working in early years myself, I just feel this is the wrong location for this to be placed.
Councillor K-Bright.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Keane, for your comments. In my head, I'd taken it to mean the wider catch-all of vulnerable, like care leavers, people with SEND, etc., rather than exactly to some of the earlier comments that were made. I'm, if not here, where? These are, as Councillor Keane said, they're people that have signed up. They're young people. They need supervision. They need help. They've signed up for help. This is going to have long-term benefits for the wider community. And I think by approving this kind of development, it tells these vulnerable people that they matter. I have absolutely no problem approving this.
Thank you. I do have a couple of other people waiting to speak. Generally, I do not comment on applications. I listen, but I would like to on this. I am a voting member of this committee as well as chair, and I do want to comment on this. I'd like to thank Councillor Keane for her comments. In my previous work, I was one of the social workers that placed this kind of family in this kind of unit. So I'm not going to comment on the kind of family that gets placed there. However, there is also, I do have a concern regarding the parking, because one of the issues that comes up is that there will be visiting social workers, placement plans, there will be reviews after 1 week, there will be reviews after another couple of weeks, there are meetings after meetings after meetings. Any foster care, and this isn't foster care, will tell you it's like Piccadilly Circus in their house in the first 3 months, and there are 4 families. So there will be a lot of movement, and so I do have concerns about the parking in particular, but I just support what Councillor Keane said and move on to Councillor Wing as the next.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to take a different tack here because I too have worked in social services and taught for a significant length of my life and visited places like this, and we desperately need places like this. But it seems to me we've moved away from very often these places being covered by legislation which relates to Ofsted or the CQC, towards and away from legislation around HMOs and private landlord legislation, because we have a care leavers facility in Ramsgate that I know is covered by none of that, and actually has been run really badly on occasions, and those young people haven't been supported because the private landlord actually doesn't give a damn. What really concerns me, you've got 4 parents, so I'm assuming it could be 4 single parents with 4 children, or it could be two couples with 2 kids. Now, there has been no adaptation to that building whatsoever. There's no ensuite facilities. So we've got 4 parents with a single child. We've got 1 bathroom and 1 shower facility. This for me, we're desperate for facilities like this. But this facility, if it is going to be a proper state-of-the-art facility that is really going to make a difference to some of our most vulnerable people, it needs to have appropriate adaptations. It needs to at least have ensuite facilities in 4 of the rooms. It at least needs to have a play area for the children. It at least needs to have 2 kitchens. You know, you could have up to 4 parents and 4 kids, possibly 8 kids, all in the same area. I don't see how this is conducive to, without further adaptations to that building, I do not see how this is going to be conducive to actually helping vulnerable parents develop better parenting skills.
Councillor Boyd.
Thank you, Chair. This property is in my ward, in fact, and I'm very aware of the reservations from the neighbours of this property. I was quite alarmed at the extent of the police requirements, and echoing Councillor Alban, Councillor Matterface. It felt more scary than protective, so I'm struggling to approve this, I'm afraid. Thank you.
Councillor Matterface.
Councillor Wings raised a point. I mean, these are the floor plans. Are there any I mean, I can't see anything about changing any of that, so is it just going to be as is?
So the floor plans that have been provided have just it really indicated which bedrooms at the moment would be changing into staff rooms. So to pick up the point about the standard of what's being created, you've got a shower room on the top floor. You've then got an ensuite linked to a bedroom, and then a bathroom on the first floor, and then there are no bedrooms on the ground floor, but you've got a toilet. I understand the concerns that Councillor Wings raised in terms of the standard of this type of facility. However, to remind members, obviously similar sort of issues come up a few times on HMOs. There is no policy related specifically to the standard that can be applied to this. There is no tangible reason for refusal that members could put forward that says that what's being provided is not of sufficient standard for the use in which it is providing, because we have not defined that standard in policy, and there's no national guidance about that relates to planning legislation. Whilst I understand the point that's being raised, this is obviously, KCC will have to decide to put people in this facility, and therefore it will have to achieve a certain standard. I appreciate that there are concerns about potentially whether it needs more bathrooms, for example, for convenience. But clearly, obviously, if there is an issue on the site in terms of capacity linked to that 4-parent thing, people will not be placed there. That would be the expectation from KCC's perspective.
The ground floor, there's a tiny little bit that says utility. Now, this is going to be, I take your point, there's no regulations that we can follow for that. But if you've got families with small children, and that's where the washing machine's going to go, it doesn't look very satisfactory, does it? And I mean, a master bedroom with a dressing room. I'm not sure what ES is. Extra storage? I don't know. But if for... Oh, there is an ensuite. Ah.
So just to this point, it's literally that the floor plan has not been updated other than basically where it's changing to include staff rooms. So the reference to master bedroom is literally just what it was previously, I suppose. And to your point about utilities, yeah, I take the point. That's a small space. Obviously, people would have washing machines in kitchens, etc. But I understand that there's a concern about how it's managed. Ultimately, it's about how it's managed and the supervision that's provided there. That will dictate, obviously, how successful it is and how it operates.
Basically, you're saying there are no particular specifics that would apply to premises like this laid down.
Not from planning policy. Ultimately, for example, if we say this is a separate issue, but it's a C2 use, a care home. We've just been talking about care homes. We are not looking at the layout of a care home to ensure that it's providing a certain number of bathrooms, for example. There's no planning policy related to that. It's simply not within our purview. That would be a requirement of the care provider in that instance.
Councillor Makinson, did you want to come in?
My point has been covered, really. I mean, I'm very conflicted about this, but my immediate reaction was not enough bathrooms is going to cause a lot of trouble with vulnerable people. And I know the question has been answered. Thank you.
Councillor Wing.
I mean, I think there is a legislation that trumps everything, and it's a safeguarding issue. We've got the Children's Act, there is a safeguarding issue. I think if 4 adults in my family with kids were to share a house that size, although there wouldn't be safeguarding issues and we'd muddle along, I can't imagine 4 vulnerable adults with children having to negotiate their way around use of a bathroom or use of a kitchen or play area, for example.
Councillor Bayford.
Thank you, Chair. Personally, I believe that the extreme needs of these people outweigh the a higher standard of living within the residents. Thank you.
Councillor Rattigan.
Just going back to the point you made, Chair, about the parking, because I mean Leyland Road is a nightmare at the best of times. Getting along the road, go down towards there. Was there any comments made by KCC regarding highway? So I didn't hear if there was.
Thank you, Chair. So KCC wouldn't normally comment on this type of application because it's what's called a non-protocol application, but we did require we went back to them and asked them nicely for a comment. They were specifically looking again about the amount of parking because they consider it to be a wide unclassified road, and because they considered that there were 3 off-street spaces. Obviously, it's I suppose my professional view that one of those is a garage. Therefore, I think it's worth taking account that it's the 2 spaces, the tandem in front. But because of the achievement of the parking standards with regards to the number of staff, it does meet the requirements, and it's not considered that it would warrant a recommendation for refusal from highways. That's the highways perspective on it.
Councillor J. Bright.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I just wanted to say that I'm really conflicted about this one as well. I can totally understand the need for this kind of facility, but I am concerned about that. I know there's no legislation that says that we must have a certain amount of bathrooms, but I am slightly concerned about that with potty training little ones and things like that. But on the other hand, this could be a very busy family house with loads of kids in it as well. So I don't know. I think it could be very well managed, and it could potentially be a lifesaver for the people that live here. But then also in Broadstairs, I'm pretty sure that in Buckmaster House there's going to be a very similar facility there. I don't think it's come to planning yet, but for mums and babies, that's in a much better position. It has parking, it doesn't have neighbours immediately next to it, so I think there probably are better sites for this kind of thing. So I'm sort of flip-flopping from one to another, sorry.
just picking up on Councillor Wing's comment, I think whilst there isn't any, as Mr Livingstone has said, I don't think there's any planning legislation, but I think you're right to raise the Children Act and how social workers would see it through the various versions of looked after children's legislation and who would place here. This isn't a KCC facility, it's the Borrowdale Family Centre, which means that placements wouldn't necessarily come from KCC. I say that with some trepidation. But yeah, I'm also conflicted, I have to admit, and there are no other speakers, so I don't know where I'm going now. So at that point, I'm going to have to go to the vote. So who would like to vote in favour, please? And abstention, and against? And abstentions? So the motion is lost. Thank you. Just bear with us a minute.
Thank you, Chair. So just to outline, obviously, the concerns that the members have raised, concerns about concerns over public safety in this location, and also in terms of the impact on living conditions. Obviously, that has covered two different things. One is the neighbours and the impact on living conditions of neighbours, and also there are concerns about the facility itself. Now that, as I've outlined, I don't think could be supported, certainly on an appeal basis, in terms of the standard of the accommodation. It's, as I say, about how it's managed. But obviously, in terms of a refusal of the application, as with earlier, the officers would normally recommend that the application would be deferred to be brought back with a report to be able to outline potential reasons for refusal, so that we can ensure that in providing it to you, that we can, the council can put forward a refusal, if you're minded to refuse it following further debate, that could be supported at appeal. So, I've obviously heard what you've said, and obviously, if not to take the clerk or the chair's thunder, but if a member wanted to propose a motion, then.
I do have a suggestion, but before I do that, Councillor Orban, did you have any?
Well, I think we do need very good reasons to refuse this, and it's sensible for this to be deferred back to officers to come back to members with those recommendations for refusal.
Councillor Orban, do you mind if I come back and just also say what I was going to suggest? And then, because as a group, we need to come to a conclusion as to a motion to put forward, so we could do what you've just said. I was wondering whether or not to come back to defer and return with a view to looking at reducing, thinking of Councillor Wing's comments and Councillor Matterface about the actual facilities, reducing this from a 4-unit to a 3-unit.
The answer is no, Chair.
You want a straight refusal? Yeah. Councillor Bright.
I'm not really clear on. I think we're split though in why we're refusing it, because there's there are members that are refusing it because they're against it for sort of neighbour reasons and community reasons, and it seems to me that there are members refusing it because they're not happy with the actual the layout. And I think we need to establish that first, because if we go back and say, right, come back to us with why we should defer it for neighbouring reasons, well, that might not be answering all the questions for everyone. And I can't support either of those motions because I'm fine with it. But I'd be more aligned with an approach that was about the facilities, not with the use case.
Thank you, Councillor Bright. That is why we're having this part of the debate. So we're debating where to go next. Mr Livingstone wants to come back in.
So I think because of that, the nature of the different issues that have been raised, the suggestion from the officer perspective would be to defer, to bring back to members with potential reasons for refusal, to consider the concerns on public safety and the impact on living conditions, and quality of accommodation. We can consider that point and see if we can find any guidance on it, although, as I've outlined, I don't believe that there is any planning reasons to refuse it, but we can certainly provide additional reasons, around that.
Councillor Alban.
Yes, it's effectively what I'm saying. It's effectively what I put forward, so don't complicate matters. Let's get it simple, let's get it back to officers, and then let them come back to us.
Okay, so Councillor Alban wants to propose a motion to refuse and defer to officers.
Can I come in?
But, okay, he's coming back again.
Sorry, just to be clear, the decision tonight wouldn't be to refuse it. I understand that's what members want to do, but this is to defer it for us to bring back with you for potential reasons for refusal, to outline concerns over public safety and the impact on living conditions and consideration of the quality of the accommodation to be provided.
Seconder, do I have?
Oh, Councillor Alban proposal then.
Yeah. Sorry, I've taken that as, sorry, I took you as the proposer of that, Councillor Alban. I had 3 simultaneous hands go up there. I'm going to take Councillor Rizeki, I think. Thank you. You all went straight for it exactly at the same time. Those in favour? And those against? And abstentions? Thank you. That's carried. We've just got a few people leaving, so I'll just pause a minute before we go into the next one, give you a chance. You are, of course, welcome to stay for more, but most people don't, so fair enough. Okay, thank you. So we're now moving on to the next item under 5D, the last item under 5D, which is 2 to 3 the Broadway, Ramsgate. Public speaking against the application is Ms Yanka. You have 3 minutes.
Good evening. I'm Vivian Yanka and my flat is directly attached to Seabird. It's a Victorian building with no sound installation or double glazing. I am pleased to see that the Council has taken into account some of the issues we have raised as objectors to this application, but I really don't feel you have gone far enough. I hope that the members have viewed the video and photos I submitted. I would like members to do a site visit to see the proximity of my flat and others to Seabird, its backyard and the outdoor kitchen, which as far as I'm aware has not got planning permission. I'm going to focus on 3 things: the abuse of the current licensing, the outdoor kitchen, and my request for additional conditions. So number 1, unfortunately under its current licensing hours, Seabird regularly fails to comply with noise management. The music, particularly the bass vibrations and amplified quiz nights, travels through the building, keeping me and my neighbours awake. It's not that they aren't aware of the noise nuisance to neighbours, as I have notified them and had to message Stuart Langley, the licensee, when the noise is intrusive after the licensing hours, recently at 4 a.m. in the morning. From his responses, it is clear that neither he nor his manager are always on site. Excuses are given about their staff misbehaving. What confidence can I have that this will change? I can only see that it will get worse with extended hours. No noise management has been implemented, so I have no confidence that their regard for their neighbours will change. Your report says their noise management plan has been implemented. If it has made no difference. This is a real worry for me. During the summer months, the bar leaves its windows and doors open, allowing music and chatter to spill into the street and into our homes. People congregate outside, smoking and drinking, talking loudly beneath my bedroom window. Some even sit on the low wall directly outside the flats opposite, treating it as an extension of the bar. Number 2 is the outdoor kitchen. As far as I'm aware, this has not got planning permission. It is a nuisance. The smells permeate my kitchen and bathroom that overlook the outdoor area, regardless whether it's for barbecue or electric cooking. There is no extraction arrangement, and I would ask that all cooking is done inside the building as it always has been done previously. Number 3, if an extension is to be granted, I would ask that the following binding and enforceable conditions are added. A 6-month review to ensure compliance with licensing and noise regulations, proper soundproofing, including double glazing on all windows and doors, and a requirement that customers leave quietly and promptly, with actual enforcement, i.e. a member of staff outside ensuring that this happens, not just signage. Thank you.
Thank you. The Principal Planning Officer will now outline the report. Oh, she's gone, no.
Still me, Chair. Still me.
I'm just reading what's written in front of me. The Planning Applications Manager will now outline the report.
Thank you, Chair. And to be clear, that's on me for not updating the notes. So, okay, let's... Okay, so the application site is identified in red from this Google image. So members may be familiar with where this is on Westcliff Road at the end, the northern extent of Addington Street for 2 to 3 Broadway. So this is the property in question. So the application is to vary the conditions attached to the 2013 permission. The proposal originally was to alter the opening hours to be open until 10:30 Sunday to Thursday and 11:30 Friday, Saturday. During the course of the application, that's been changed to be 11 p.m. on Friday, Saturday, and bank holidays rather than 11:30. So permission was granted in as I said, 2013 for a retail and a cafe mixed use with seating and the rear yard. So if we look at the original plan, so this is the premises itself. You've then got further up Addington Street. So members will be familiar with Addington Street and the number of, the screen in front of us is, there we go. You can note that there are obviously commercial premises up and down Addington Street. This is a view into the rear yard in question. And this is a view of the outdoor kitchen, which is the subject of the concerns of the neighbour. So to just deal with this issue particularly, the report deals with this. This is not under consideration within this application. This is a variation of the opening hours, and this is a matter that's been passed to enforcement to investigate about whether or not it's a permanent structure requiring planning permission, or whether or not there has been a separate change of use by virtue of this function occurring outdoors. There is also obviously the requirements of the Environmental Protection Act in terms of odour, which is something that obviously environmental health would look at as to whether or not there is a statutory nuisance occurring. But that is not what is under consideration this evening. It's just about the opening hours. So you can see though from this image looking back towards the rear of properties on Westcliff Road that you are in very close proximity with a number of residential properties. In terms of the original layout of the building, you can see that so Broadway is on the left-hand side here. The seating area to the rear is at the back, and then you've got sort of two relatively small customer areas internally. Main issues, unsurprisingly, are the impact on the living conditions of neighbours for members to consider. As identified, you've got residential properties in close proximity, therefore the consultation with the environmental health team about noise and disturbance has been critical in terms of this application. So we have received a noise management plan which primarily is looking at the noise caused by basically music inside the premises. Obviously mention's been made about bass. There's specific provision made within that noise management plan about the mounts to bass units and wall brackets with regards to the speakers themselves. There is a condition that's proposed for basically no amplified or non-amplified music to be played after 10:30, and also the premises has got to be operated in accordance with the noise management plan in and of itself, with the doors leading to the premises into the rear yard to be closed after 9 p.m. Condition 3, which has been obviously put forward by Environmental Health, is also that no amplified music, recorded music or other amplified sound shall be audible at the perimeter of the premises. Now obviously in that instance, if that's the case and we receive reports of that, then that's a matter that will be looked at by Environmental Health first of all, but it would allow us to then basically look at the breach of planning condition notice if Environmental Health's evidence that they gather from recorders, etc., identify that there has been a consistent breach. Then there is also a condition 5, which was on the original, I believe was on the original permission, but certainly imposed here, which is that basically the rear yard shan't be used other than between the hours of 9 and 6 Sunday to Thursday, and 9 and 9 on Fridays, Saturdays, and bank holidays. With that condition did include a requirement for rear doors to be kept closed at all times. Again, this is about noise transmission, and obviously in terms of ensuring that that does happen, certainly more than not. In terms of the range of conditions, therefore, Environmental Health have considered that by virtue of applying those conditions and enforcing those conditions, that actually the increase in opening hours from the current 9 till 9 within the building would be allowed to go to 9 till 11 on a Friday and Saturday and on bank holidays. So overall, the application is recommended for approval on that basis, requiring those conditions to be complied with. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I move that the officer's recommendation is adopted. Would the Vice Chair please second?
Seconded.
Thank you. Do I have any speakers? Councillor Wing.
I'm really confused because, as you know, if you look at that diagram, the service area was inside. So originally this was a shop, then it became Vinyl Head Cafe, it shut when cafes shut, then it became Eats and Beats and it was open at weekends and Fridays, and now it's Seabird. And you know, I would recommend anybody go and eat at Seabird. The food is fantastic. It's won awards recently, but I have to sit here and try and make sense of this application. So initially, the environmental officer made a number of concerns. One of them being that this building is not designed to be open in the evening because it was a shop with a huge front of window. The thing that really concerns me is the outdoor space has to be shut at 6 p.m. on a Sunday to Thursday and at 9 p.m. on a Friday to Saturday. But how is that possible when all the cooking happens outside in a place which is now clearly the service area, which was once inside the area? So although the cooking area isn't relevant, it's not a consideration. By default it is, because they will be cooking until 11 o'clock Friday to Saturday and 10:30 Sunday to Thursday. But how are they actually going to get out into the garden when the doors have got to be shut? The other issue I have is that smokers will be on the pavement. It's one person wide, and invariably there's parking bays there, free parking bays. So invariably there are cars parked along there. Why is it okay for people to smoke outside the premises on the pavement, but not okay to smoke in the garden? It's the same situation. That smoke is going to permeate to the residents around, and as you can see, that the two windows there actually overlook it. You know, in some of our historic areas, I live on this road. Everybody overlooks everybody, so it's sort of like it's a unique, and I would suggest a site visit, but we've seen the kitchen. I haven't seen the kitchen before. I think the comparisons to the Bedford pub up the road and the Queen Charlotte, which is 2 doors down from me, are not relevant because they don't have the frontage, and their cooking happens indoors. They've got indoor cooking areas. So unless there's some mitigation, particularly with the outdoor cooking area, because there is no way you're going to stop those smells, even if it's electric. And let's face it, those smells could happen between 9 in the morning and 10:30 or 11 o'clock at night. You know, I love smelling my neighbour's barbecue in the summer, but I wouldn't want to smell it all day. So I think we need to reject this, and we need to have some sort of resolution over the outdoor cooking before we can actually make a decision about increasing the licensing hours.
Councillor Wing, I just want to check, at the beginning of the meeting you declared an interest. Could you use your mic? Use your mic. Thanks.
Down the other end of the road, so I just declared an interest to say I live on the street. I don't have any interest or relevance with this building whatsoever.
So just to clarify, I just want to check, Councillor Bing, you are of an open mind in this debate. That's what I'm just checking.
I am of a very open mind.
Okay,
I just have two concerns, and my concerns, one of them relates to what the environmental officer said about the glass on the window, and the other one relates to the kitchen, the cooking area, which is presently outside. If it had been inside, then I wouldn't be raising that issue at all.
Thank you, Councillor Wing. There is a very specific format for declaration of interest, and there are different phrases, so perhaps that wasn't the right phrase at the beginning. And I've certainly got caught out by that in the past by using the wrong phrase and had a slapped wrist on it somewhat from Charles, I think it was.
Shall I say something else? It's perfectly reasonable for you to declare that you live near an application site. That's absolutely fine. It's just that to make it clear that that you were happy to take part in this item, and yeah, that's fine. Thank you.
Right, Councillor J. Bright. No. K. Bright. Sorry, I wrote the wrong initial down. I lost there.
That's fine, Chair. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Wing, as well for your input. I think this is quite clear to me that there's clearly operational issues with this business at the moment in terms of the impact it's having on neighbours. We're being asked to approve an extension on those hours of operation. I can't see actually how we can approve it right now, because there are so many questions left answered that I think it's the wrong building. I think it's the wrong use at the moment, and I'm not gonna vote to approve it.
So just at one point, I think it's really important, and we talked about this last time at committee, that members are going to listen to the full debate before they state what their intentions are for voting, to ensure that there's no point about they're already predetermined before that. No, but I accept that. I accept from the hand that point, so I don't want to dwell on that too much. I think just to come back on this point with regards to the cooking outside, again, to be clear, this is not actually under consideration by members. I understand the point that's being raised that there's a concern, well, how will this business operate? Well, ultimately, there is going to potentially need to be a separate application for structures that are in there, in the garden at the moment, because they don't have planning permission. There's no other application at the moment, so enforcement will need to investigate how that's fixed, what the function is, whether or not it changes the use of that space away from what was approved in 2013. But again, this is just about the opening hours that members are considering. So to the point that's raised there, that's all that's being considered at this point. Obviously, this does require quite a few noise mitigation measures about the noise emanating from the premises, because, as identified, it's a single skin building. It doesn't have a lot of insulation properties, so it does need to be managed very carefully, including obviously restrictions on hours, including that rear yard. To the point about smokers, and I again understand the concerns. Obviously, the reality of having a rear yard, which it is obviously when it's open, is that people would congregate there to smoke if they do smoke, but obviously the closure of that at the times that's stated would result in people being outside at the front. This is a common occurrence for this type of premises for people that do smoke. Obviously, we are in a very different world than we were when the smoking ban came in, but you know, in and of itself, the opening hours, it may result in people being on the street later, potentially, but it is difficult to have a cause and effect that says that there is going to be a dramatic increase because of everyone still smoking, for example, at this time. And ultimately, the use obviously has to stop anyway at 11 o'clock on a Friday and Saturday. And again, environmental health consider that in terms of both noise emanating from the premises and congregation of people, that there wouldn't be significant harm that would sort of contravene the statutory nuisance part of the EPA.
Got waiting to speak.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Livingston has just stated the facts. You've got to deal with the facts of what's in front of you, and that is purely in relation to the alteration and amendment of a condition. End of story. Whatever else is available that is surrounding this is not relevant to this application, and I think you've got to be careful as to what you're saying in relation to this. So, as far as standing, I could stand outside there. I could smoke to my heart's content outside there all day and all night. There's no law that says I can't do that. There's no law that says anybody can't do that. That in itself is neither here nor there. The issues Mr. Livingston has said in relation to the cooking outside, that is being looked at by planning enforcement at the moment, and that is going through the process. Things like noise emanation, disturbing residents, that's dealt with by environmental health. We're talking about a time, and I cannot see any of the outside arguments being involved in this whatsoever. So just deal with the time.
Councillor Wing.
Well, I sit here actually in support of the business as well, because outdoor space has to be shut on a Sunday and Thursday at 6 p.m. It also has to be shut on a Saturday at 9 p.m. I'm assuming that means nobody can go out of that door, which means if we approve this business won't be able to cook beyond that hour. So, you know, either the outdoor space is shut or it's not shut. Cooking is part of the business. So I can't see how the cooking area is not irrelevant to this, because the letter of the law says that that outdoor space cannot be used.
So this is only varying condition 4. That condition 5, was in existence in 2013. So in terms of the use of the premises, it's also, the wording is, and Councillor Matterface has just identified it, it's to be used by patrons. Now I think that, I don't want to complicate matters, because the enforcement of that condition relates specifically, as said, to patrons using it. However, that doesn't mean automatically that you can have a kitchen outside under the permission in 2013. And I really don't want to dwell on this point because it's part of a planning enforcement investigation. But the point here is as Councillor Orban has said, it is condition 4, it's the opening times. The use of that yard area is going to be subject to separate investigation and potentially action, ultimately. But obviously we would always, as per the enforcement protocol, want to work with anyone that's contravening planning to potentially get a new application in if we think it can be mitigated, and obviously then everyone will get a chance to comment on it, and members will get the chance to call it in, potentially, if there has been a breach. So it is just condition 4 that is being looked at.
Councillor Matterface next.
To ask a question, you mentioned environmental health, obviously dealing with it. Does the licensing officer have any role in this? Because, I mean, obviously a lot of this would relate. I mean, it's a crossover, isn't there?
There is crossover, yes, in so much as that it will form part of the next training session, as requested by a number of people. They're two separate things, ultimately. They're crossover in some sense of, you know, we would consider issues of noise and disturbance, and licensing might look at the issues of public safety because of congregation of people, etc. So that, and there is a, you know, it's rather more fluid. So licensing, I must admit, I don't have the information about what license is applied. Obviously, the residents may mention that breaches occur. That is an entirely separate process, and obviously, if there's a need for a reviewing of that license, that's something for the licensing team to look at.
They have the four key factors, not 5, 4, yeah. So and then obviously that might be a case, but it would be completely separate. And as you heard me say, it's the yard can't be used by patrons, not by the staff. I've been to eateries where they have to bring the stuff in and out from outside. You know, it's, and as you say, if that kitchen shouldn't be there, that is a separate issue altogether from this.
Councillor K-Bright.
I promise this will be the last time I could say anything tonight. So we know that what goes on inside the bar at the moment has a negative impact on the neighbours. I think I can be safe to assume that if we extend the opening hours into the evening and to the late night, it will have more of an impact. It will still continue to have an impact. So regardless of where the kitchen is, regardless of what people are doing inside or outside, if it's already having a negative impact on the quality of the neighbour's life, then I can't understand how I'm going to be able to say, yeah, I'm fine with this continuing. So I haven't been convinced.
At which point we move to the vote for the officer's recommendation for approval. Those in favour? And those against? That's lost.
Thank you, Chair. So obviously the recommendation from officers is based on the advice from Environmental Health about the extent of the mitigation that's been proposed and the conditions that are obviously already in place. We've updated Condition 2 to include the noise management plan. Obviously, in terms of the comments that have been raised, we've identified that the other issues to do with the kitchen area, etc., isn't relevant. Therefore, the only thing that members have raised, and it's to Councillor Bright's point, the concern that by extending the hours with the view that's been taken, hearing the resident that there is a noise and disturbance issue, that then the proposal would result in additional noise and disturbance to harm the living conditions of the neighbouring property, or neighbouring properties, I should say. Ultimately, if members consider that is sufficient to refuse it on, then the policy in particular is QDO3, which is the living conditions policy, which talks about ensuring that there's not noise and disturbance to affect individual resident or residents. I would, however, suggest that, given this is a sort of trend at this point, to defer it to officers and bring back with a report for refusal. It feels like that's the whole of the next committee. But the reason why I'd recommend that, again, is because members would be going against environmental health, and we rely on the professional advice of environmental health to advise us on matters to do with noise. And therefore, in terms of considering the concerns of members and being able to put that back to members with a justified reason for refusal and how we might look to do that, I think it would be prudent to defer to officers to bring back to members to consider reasons for refusal or potential reasons for refusal on noise and disturbance. Thank you, Chair.
Does anyone want to propose that? Councillor Matterface, and seconded, I would take you, Councillor Bright. All those in favour? And any against? Oh, that's now carried. Thank you. Okay, that concludes the public speaking for this meeting. We now have to wait. It is, they're going. They're going. We're just waiting for the 3 members who have declared an interest in the next 3 items to leave. So just bear with us a moment. Okay, thank you. I will now call upon the clerk to read out the remaining planning applications. If a member wishes to reserve an application, will they please call out as the clerk reads?
A05 Public Conveniences, Marine Drive, Margate, Kent, CT9 1DH.
Thank you. Can I have a proposer to move that the applications that have not been reserved be determined in accordance with the officer's recommendation, Councillor Rattigan, and seconded by Councillor Rizeki? Do members agree? Thank you. And for the benefit of the public, I will now call upon the clerk to read out the applications that have been determined.
A05 Public Conveniences, Marine Drive, Margate, Kent, CT9 1DH.
Thank you. Moving into agenda item 6, application for a non-material amendment to planning permission, let's just read Garage Block, rear of 161-213 Clements Road, Ramsgate. The committee is asked to approve the application for a non-material amendment to the planning permission, and the planning applications manager will now outline the report.
Thank you, Chair. Members will be familiar with this application for 9 self-contained flats in the rear of Clements Road. So this is a council housing application. We've received an application to make changes to that permission under the non-material amendment procedure. So a reminder, the consideration is not whether or not the changes are impact on the character and appearance of the area in a harmful way or a positive way. It's about whether or not actually the change in itself would be material, would actually have an impact on the permission that then warrants a different type of application coming in, say for example a variation of planning conditions. So we are looking at minor changes in relation to a sort of relative to the scale of the application. So to that end, this application makes changes to change the colour of the windows, door frames and infill panels from beige grey to anthracite grey. It increases the height of the parapet on top of the building by 17.5 centimetres, and also it includes an inclusion of a lift overrun, so you know the sort of bit above the lift to ensure you've got the safety gap that you need, but that would not be visible beyond the parapet. So the application is considered to be a non-material amendment change, and the recommendations for approval.
I move that the officer's recommendation is adopted. Would the Vice Chair please second?
Seconded.
Do I have any questions or debate? Thank you. I really don't know about anthracite grey, but hey. So we'll now put the motion for the officer's recommendation for approval to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried. Thank you. Agenda item 7. Application for non-material amendment to planning permission, garage blocks at Tomlin Drive, Margate. Over to, again, the committee is asked to approve the application, and the planning applications manager will now outline the report.
Thank you. So same procedure, but more dwellings in this instance. There are 12 dwellings. It is a larger development and there are more changes that are proposed. So the consideration is here is whether or not these are non-material in relation to the extent of the permission that has been granted. So specifically with regards to Block D, Tomlin Drive, Margate, so it's the 4 dwellings that you can see in blue that are set behind in front of a parking area. So the proposal, and I'll come back to these plans in a second, previously these bays were white. They are now buff brick to match the rest of the building. So they are changing the material, but in terms of the actual appearance and the overall nature of the permission, it's considered that it's not a material change in the planning sense. They are also proposing, I'm afraid, the change from one type of grey to another type of grey, which is, and the rainwater goods as well for windows and doors. There are changes that are occurring to the bin stores. So to just have a very quick look, you've got bin store 1 that's on the right hand side here and bin store 2 in this area. These are changing. They previously were larger, but they're now smaller following investigations with the between the housing team and waste and recycling. As outlined in the report, the erection of bin storage is actually permitted development by a local authority, so it's not considered these changes would be material. There are a number of pathways that are changing throughout the site. They've moved to electric vehicle charging points as well, and there are slight changes in the elevations of this block D because, as you can see, rather than being a full terrace, it's now slightly stepped because of a change in level. The building's actually getting lower rather than higher, so the overall height of the development doesn't increase, and therefore overall the changes are considered to be non-material. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I move that the officer's recommendation is adopted. Would the Vice Chair please second?
Seconded.
And does anyone want to ask any questions? Thank you. In which case we will put the motion for the officer's recommendation for approval to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried. Thank you. That concludes the business for this meeting. Thank you for your attendance and good night.